Hello, this video is for people who have chosen to do or thinking of doing RE in year 12. I thought I might do a video just to give you guys something to do, maybe start thinking about some of the topics we're going to study. Yeah, and I thought what I'd do is, you should have received kind of information pack or booklet which has a few tasks you can do in, or I would like you to do before the course begins, and also gives you a bit of an overview of the structure of the course. So I'm not going to say anything about the overview of the structure of the course and stuff in this video. What I'm going to do is go through a bit of content, some stuff that I think is really interesting. You may agree, you may disagree. This is on the Buddhism section of the course. And yeah, there's going to be, I'll send out some readings that you can use in relation to this. And there'll be some tasks you can do, and then next time I'll do a video at some point kind of feeding back and following on from this one. Yeah, there's no obligation to do any of this stuff. It's just if you want to do it, if you think it would give you a bit of something to do, and maybe some add to your confidence going into the studies, to your studies in year 12. So most of you who are watching this video probably have studied Buddhism before. So lots of parts of the Buddhism course will be familiar to you. They're just looked at in a little bit more depth, but what we're going to look at now is something that we haven't really talked about in any depth at all in GCSE. So we're going to look at what's called the Buddha's intellectual context. So Buddhism did not begin it wasn't like there was no religion where the Buddha lived and then there was Buddhism. It didn't come out of nowhere, and in fact, as we'll see, many of the religions that were around when the Buddha lived were had quite a lot of similarities to Buddhism, but they also had important differences. So we're going to look at a particular religion called Brahminism. Sometimes it's spelled, you can see the word on the screen there, Brahminism. Sometimes it's spelled Brahmanism, but sometimes with an I instead, so it can be spelled two different ways. And we're going to go through what Brahmanism was like in this video. I'm just going to talk about the religion of Brahmanism, and then your task is going to be, I'm going to give you a reading of some Buddhist teachings, and I want you to highlight where there are similarities between Buddhism and Brahmanism and where there are differences. You don't need to take any notes from this video, or what I'm going to do is I'll send out the slides that this video is based on. Best thing to do will be to print them out, and if you need to add any notes from what I say, just add them onto the slides. So, yeah, like I say, Buddhism starts in northeast India. Where the Buddha was born is actually in Nepal, but there wasn't a division between those two separate countries at that time. In fact, would be wrong to say that at the time when the Buddha was born, which is about 2500 BC, it would be wrong to say that the countries of India and Nepal existed as we know them today. What there was in that area a series of different kingdoms loosely kind of linked together. So yeah, it's that area of the world, Nepal and northeast India, that we're talking about. And yeah, Brahmanism, there were several different religious traditions in the world at that time. I'll do another video looking at some of the other traditions there, but probably the most influential, and certainly the one that the Buddha talks about the most in his teachings, was Brahmanism. So yeah, we're going to look at what Brahmanism is and go through its key features. So let's begin. Okay, so it's often said, and you'll often hear written in introductory books about Buddhism, that the Buddha was born as a Hindu. There's some truth to this, but it's not really quite true. One is that we don't really know what religion the Buddha was born into at all. The information we have about him is very, there's not very much of it, and it doesn't tell us that information. It doesn't say he was born as this particular religion. Also, it's true that Hinduism is a complex religion, and very complex to define. What it is very difficult to define. It's actually used to cover many different religious traditions in India, which have a variety of beliefs and practices. So if you said the Buddha was a Hindu, that wouldn't completely tell you what he believed in. However, what is true is that one of the dominant religious traditions of the time when the Buddha lived is what is known as Brahmanism, what we now call Brahmanism. Brahmanism, the truth of that idea that there's a relation to Hinduism is that Brahmanism is the tradition from which Hindu grew out of. So Brahmanism was what we call the tradition back then, and modern Hinduism is a kind of development of that tradition called Brahmanism. So it's not clear that the Buddha was born into a family that followed this religion. But what is clear is that it was a very influential religion in that northeastern India area where the Buddha lived. And his teachings and the Buddhist scriptures show that he interacted a lot with followers of this tradition. So often when the Buddha is explaining his teachings, he is explaining them to people who are followers of Brahmanism and showing how what he believes is different to Brahmanism. Okay, so that's a complicated thing, but I suppose the thing you need to know is that Brahmanism is the religion which modern Hinduism grew out of, and that was the most dominant religion we find in northeast India at the time the Buddha lived, but certainly not the only religion. Now, Brahmanism is based on a set of holy books called the Vedas. These are the source of religious authority for followers of Brahmanism. So if they want to know what to believe, what they should be believing and what they should be doing religiously, they follow the Vedas. What the Vedas teach is called Dharma. That's a word that's used in Buddhism too. This word has a number of meanings. Here's two of those meanings, two most important probably. Dharma is the true nature of the universe, and it is also the way in which people should live their lives. And those two ideas are linked. The idea is that that is by following your Dharma, you are conforming to the way the universe should be. So, there's a way the universe is, and there's a way you should live, but those two are linked. You should live in harmony with the way the universe is, and that's what it means to live a good life. So those are the Vedas. Okay, let's move on. The Four Varnas is another important part of the Brahmanism religion. So the Vedas teach that society is divided into four groups, and these are the four. Brahmins are at the top. They are priests in the religion of Brahmanism, so they are the top group. Kshatriyas are warriors and rulers, so people who fight. When we say warriors, we don't mean the kind of general people of an army. We mean the kind of, warrior and a king are kind of linked here, the top warriors and rulers. Thirdly, you've got Vaishyas. Vaishyas are farmers and traders. And lastly, we have what's called Shudras. Shudras are servants and unskilled labourers, so people who work in farms and things like that. Now, in the Varna system, these are called the Four Varnas. In the Varna system, the group someone was in was decided by birth. You were born into a Varna. Moving between Varnas was not possible, and people were expected to marry within their own Varna. So if you're a Vaishya, you marry a Vaishya person. And you can't be born a Vaishya and then become a Kshatriya or become a Brahmin. You can't go up or down. And the idea is there's a clear idea of some being better than the other. Those at the top of the system are seen as purer, better than those below them. Brahmins were at the top of the system. As priests were the ones who studied and taught the Vedas. As priests, they were the ones who studied and taught the Vedas. They were there for the holders of religious authority. So Brahmins at the top, they're the ones who study the Vedas. They're the ones who tell other people how they should be living. Now, this might ring a bell with you, with the idea of being divided in certain groups, because the Varna system is the basis, or it was elaborated on, and became what we call the caste system in modern day India. So over the years, basically, the Varnas became more complicated with lots and lots of different groups emerging. So now there are many, many, many different castes in India, in Indian Hindu society, but the Varna system with the four groups was the basis of it. Part of the Vedas is something called the Hymn of the Cosmic Man, which teaches that Varnas were established at the beginning of time. So it's not seen as just a kind of something that's happened in this situation. The idea in the Vedas is that Varnas, being divided into these four Varnas, is something that is always been true of mankind. It's kind of fundamental to humankind that they're divided into these four groups. So this hymn says that at the start of the universe there was a great cosmic man, like a huge supernatural being, I suppose. He sacrificed himself to make the different parts of the universe. And these parts of himself became the Brahmins, that became the different Varnas. The mouth became the Brahmins, the priests, because they're the ones who speak the Vedas. His arms became the Kshatriyas, I guess because they're the ones who are doing the fighting. His thighs became the Vaishyas, I don't know why they're thighs, but maybe because they hold up the rest of society. And his feet became the Sudras, they're at the bottom of the system. So you can see this is the idea of, in that religion, the idea of division of society into these fixed groups was something that was fundamental. It was seen as a fundamental part of the universe. And that'll be important as a contrast to Buddhism as we go on. Linked to Varna is the idea of Svar Dharma. We said that Dharma is the way the universe is and how you should live. Svar means your own, or your unique to you. So the idea is that different people have a different way of living. So Brahmanism taught that someone's dharma, how they should live their life, depended on their varna, whether the group they were born into. The duties that someone has based on their varna is known as their svar dharma, the particular dharma of that group. Therefore, it is the svar dharma of a king to rule the kingdom, the svar dharma of a servant to serve his or her master, and so on. According to Brahmanism, to have a good life, one must follow one's svar dharma. Modern ideas of egalitarianism and individualism were absent in Brahmanism. So, if you were a ruler, you had to rule. That was your dharma. And to be a good person, you had to do that dharma. Individual and individualism, the idea that you should decide what you want to do for yourself, was not part of the religion. It was your duties in life were fixed by your station in life, the place you were born. Egalitarianism, the idea that everyone should have equal opportunities, was also absent from the religion. If you were born as a servant, you should serve according to this religion. If you were born as a king, you should rule. It's based on your position in life. So that was the idea of Svar Dharma. Now, an important part of someone's dharma, your Svar Dharma, was performing religious rituals. So it wasn't just your duty to do a certain job, it was also your duty to do certain rituals. The Vedas describe many gods and give instructions on how to make sacrifices to them. So there are lots of gods in Brahmanism. And it's very practical, the Vedas. It tells you how to make sacrifices to the gods. Now, when people say sacrifices, they often think, sacrificing animals. But these sacrifices usually did not involve killing animals. Instead, certain plants or food are thrown into fires while prayers are said. So plants or food thrown into fire, people say prayers. Now these sacrifices are done in order to guarantee the support of the gods in this life and the next. So the idea is, by doing these sacrifices, and those are the sacrifices that are specific to your Svar Dharma, you will get the support of the gods in this life and in the next life. So that is one of the main religious aspects of Brahmanism. Life after death. Brahmanism taught that when people die, they are reincarnated into a new body. The new birth that someone has is based on the actions they have carried out in this life. This is the teaching of karma. Obviously, there are links to Buddhism here. Someone who has carried out good actions will have a good rebirth, and obviously someone with bad actions will have a bad rebirth. For Brahmanism, carrying out good actions is defined in terms of following your Svar Dharma and performing the correct rituals. So that is what they mean when they say you do good actions, you will get a good rebirth. They mean if you follow your Svar Dharma and perform the right rituals, you'll get a good rebirth. Therefore, someone will get a good rebirth if they follow the duty of their Varna and carry out the right ritual sacrifices to the gods. Brahmanism taught that the part of the human that lives on when they die is the Atman, or soul. The Atman is said to be permanent, invisible, and unchanging. No matter what kind of being we are reborn as, our Atman stays the same. So the idea is that we have this eternal, unchanging part of ourselves that is continually reborn, life after life, life after life. It doesn't change at all through our rebirths. When one birth die, when we die in one rebirth, that Atman, unchanging Atman, goes into another body, and so on and so on and so on. Now, there's a big contrast with Buddhism here. Buddhism teaches anatta, that there's no fixed or permanent self, whereas Brahmanism teaches Atman, there is a fixed and permanent part of ourselves, our soul. Okay, suffering and escaping from rebirth. Interesting one, this, because there seems to have been some change in the Brahmanism as a religion over time. So Richard Gombrich, that's a name that you'll become familiar with. If if you do the course, because we look at lots of his teachings. Richard Gombrich argues that early Brahmanism, the earliest stages of the religion, saw life as a good thing. The aim was to fulfill your Svadharma, to make sure you had a good life both now and in your next life. So they just wanted to have more life, Let's do our rituals so we get a good rebirth and have another good life. However, by the time that the Buddha lived, a new outlook had emerged within Brahmanism, which viewed a life of rebirth after rebirth as a bad thing, full of suffering. So they started to take the view that actually it's bad to be reborn again and again. And then the ultimate goal of the religion was transformed. Now the goal was to escape from the cycle of continual rebirths. The set of books which expressed this new view and explained how to reach the new goal were called the Upanishads. So the Upanishads are a set of books as kind of the that come after the Vedas, and aim to give a kind of deeper understanding of the Vedas and of the religion of Brahmanism. And they brought this new understanding. No, it's not just about performing your rituals and getting blessings from the gods. There's actually a new goal here, and that is to escape from continual rebirth. So what happens, let's go into the Upanishads a bit more. The Upanishads focus on the nature of the human soul, or Atman. They also focus on Brahman, which is the spirit or soul of the universe. It is said to be the power or the God that underlies everything in the universe, including all the gods. So this is the idea in Brahmanism, that there's this thing called Brahman, which is like sometimes referred to as an ultimate God, or maybe just a power or a reality that lies behind everything in the universe. So you've got Atman, the individual soul, and you've got Brahman. Now, the Upanishads teach forms of meditation which are designed to bring people to a realization that their Atman is actually the same as Brahman. This realization shows people that beyond their individual personality, they are one with all other people and with the whole universe. So this is supposed to be like a kind of mystical experience that you have when you meditate, and you realize that actually the deepest part of yourself, this unchanging Atman you have, is actually in its nature the same as God. And so once you realize that, you kind of become one with God. And becoming one with God means becoming one with everyone, because everyone has God as the deepest part of themselves. So when this realization happens, an individual reaches what's called moksha, a condition in which their personality merges with Brahman. After this, they will not be reincarnated again. So you reach moksha. When you die, your soul is liberated and becomes one with the reality or God behind all things. Now, obviously, there's a link there with nirvana, but there is also some big differences with nirvana, because both nirvana and moksha are about leaving the cycle of rebirth, but there are also some differences, which we'll look at later. Okay, renouncing the world. At the time when the Buddha lived, many people did exactly what the Buddha did. They renounced the life of a married working person and lived as a homeless wanderer with no family ties, searching for the truth. So if you remember the Buddha's life story that we looked at in GCSE, the Buddha actually sees, before he becomes a wandering monk, he sees as part of the four sights a homeless wandering holy man sat meditating under a tree or something like that. Now, that's because the reason he saw that person is because that was not an uncommon thing to do. There was a movement of people doing that, becoming wandering holy people, leaving their family or normal life behind them and searching for truth. Now, the idea makes some sense in terms of the worldview of Brahmanism. If following your duty, Svadharma, and playing the role in society that is expected of you brings rebirth after rebirth, then maybe it's better to abandon this role and search for another way of living, which can help you to escape from the cycles of rebirth. So the idea is most people who study it say there was a bit of a tension within Brahmanism here, because on one hand Brahmanism wants you to do your Svadharma, but on the other hand you've got this thing about the Upanishads and saying, well, do we really want to get this good rebirth after good rebirth? Don't we really want to escape from rebirth? The way in which that resolved was that within Brahmanism, the idea of doing your Svadharma and carrying out religious rituals was considered too important to be abandoned by people in the prime of life. Instead, Brahmanism made renouncing the world an option that people could take, but only in old age. The idea is you should, when you're born, you should live your life and follow the Svadharma of your role. Like if you're a ruler, you should rule. If you're a Brahmin, you should teach the Vedas, and so on and so on. Once you've made it to old age, then you have the option, if you want to pursue the path to moksha and release from rebirth, then you can abandon life, renounce the world. So that's, again, similarities and differences with Buddhism. Abandoning the world is seen as a good thing to a certain extent, but in Buddhism, it's seen as good to become a monk whenever, as early as possible, I suppose. So, the differences there too. Okay, that's everything about Brahmanism we need to know for now. Quite a lot. What I want you to do is I'm going to send you a reading. Or if you see this video and you want the video, just email me and I'll send you the reading. Because I don't know precisely who I'm going to send this video to yet, or who needs to watch this video. I'm going to send you a reading which is quite a long reading, it's called Comparing the Buddha's Teachings with Other Religions of the Time. And all I want you to do is read that reading and just have 2 highlighters, and anything that all the stuff that's on the reading is going to be teachings in Buddhism, things about Buddhism. Anything that you can see which makes Buddhism similar to Brahmanism, highlight in one colour. Anything that you can see that makes Buddhism different to Brahmanism, highlight in another colour. Now, there's several different boxes there. You might think, some of those boxes are going to be one colour, some are going to be another, but it's not as simple as that. In quite a few of the boxes, there's going to be a bit of similarity and a bit of difference. And that actually is really good. If you've got similarities and differences in the same box, that's good. And I'll talk about why that's good in a bit later in another video. Then, once you've done that, once you've highlighted some similarities and differences, I'm also going to put another sheet up, which is like a comparison sheet, a very quick comparison sheet. It puts a lot of issues down the side, and for each one you've got to say, well, what does Brahmanism believe about this? What does Buddhism believe about that? I don't want you to write a lot of things there. I just want you to pick out the differences. It says something else there on the slides. Pick out what you think are the 2 most important. Don't bother with that. I don't need you to do that. But if you want to do the task, do that comparison sheet. A couple of things to say to end on. You'll see the word sutta, S-U-T-T-A. Don't worry about what that means, but don't worry too much about it, just to let you know so that things don't seem unclear. If you see the something sutta with a lot of kind of Pali writing that you don't understand, that a sutta is just a teaching of the Buddha that's part of the Pali Canon, so it's just a section of the Pali Canon. So I just include those for reasons that you don't need to know yet. But yeah, when I say, for example, in the first one it says the Brahma Nimantanika Sutta, that is just some part of the Pali Canon, the teachings of the Buddha. So yeah, if you want to have a go at this task, fantastic. Have a look at watch the video again for any more information you need. Have the slides on Brahmanism in front of you. Highlight the things in Buddhism that are similar to Brahmanism and the things that are different, and then fill in your comparison sheet. And then I'll put a video up as soon as I can, which kind of follows up from this, goes through the comparison sheet, make sure we're all on the same page, and then looks at where we might go from there. Okay, thanks very much.